In the early hours of June 1, 2009, Air France Flight 447 disappeared over the Atlantic Ocean, leaving the world stunned and aviation experts scrambling for answers. The Airbus A330 had departed from Rio de Janeiro en route to Paris, carrying 228 passengers and crew. The flight began routinely, cruising smoothly above the Atlantic under the command of an experienced crew and equipped with modern systems. But in the darkness of night and deep within a remote stretch of ocean, things took a devastating turn. As the aircraft entered a region known for volatile weather near the equator, it encountered a series of towering thunderclouds, common but dangerous features in the intertropical convergence zone. The plane's pitot tubes, which measure airspeed, began to ice over. These small but essential sensors are critical for providing accurate data to the flight computers and pilots. As they became blocked with ice, the airspeed readings turned unreliable, causing the autopilot to disconnect. In that moment, the smooth ride became a high-stakes test of skill and judgment. With the autopilot off, the co-pilot at the controls reacted by pulling the nose of the aircraft upward. This might seem instinctive, but at high altitude, such a move can lead to an aerodynamic stall, a condition where the wings lose lift and the plane begins to fall. The cockpit filled with warning tones and confusing alerts. The stall alarm sounded repeatedly, but the pilots failed to recognize the nature of the problem. The aircraft, instead of leveling out, continued to pitch upward, bleeding speed and lift. For more than 3 minutes, the jet descended in a stalled condition, falling from the sky at a terrifying rate, while the crew struggled to make sense of what was happening. Despite having time and altitude to recover, the lack of clear situational awareness, combined with insufficient training in manual high-altitude stall recovery, sealed the fate of the flight. At 2:14 a.m. UTC, the plane struck the ocean surface with tremendous force, killing all 228 people on board. The wreckage was scattered across the ocean floor, nearly 4,000 meters deep, in one of the most inaccessible regions of the Atlantic. Initial search efforts recovered only a small portion of the debris, and the flight recorders remained lost for nearly 2 years. When they were finally retrieved in 2011, the world learned the grim details of the final moments. The investigation revealed a cascade of errors. The iced pitot tubes were the initial trigger, but it was human error that ultimately caused the crash. The pilot's lack of understanding of the stall, compounded by poor coordination and communication in the cockpit, led to a series of incorrect actions. The aircraft was fully functional and could have been flown to safety, but confusion and misinterpretation of the situation led to a catastrophic outcome. In the aftermath, the aviation industry took several hard lessons to heart. Air France and other airlines revised training protocols, particularly in manual flying skills and high-altitude stall recovery. The design of pitot tubes was improved to better resist icing. Cockpit communication procedures were also reassessed to emphasize clearer roles and more assertive decision-making in emergencies. Air France Flight 447 was a sobering reminder that even the most advanced aircraft are not immune to human vulnerability. It highlighted how, in moments of crisis, technology alone cannot substitute for understanding, experience, and communication. The tragedy reshaped aviation safety, leaving behind a legacy of reforms aimed at preventing such a disaster from ever happening again. Some days start off so perfectly normal, they feel like a commercial for fishing rods and father-son bonding. That was the vibe near an Oklahoma riverbank one peaceful morning. Birds chirping, water gently flowing, and absolutely zero indication that the earth was about to try and swallow a child. Picture this: a father and his 12-year-old son, poles in hand, living their best rural life. The only danger they expected was a fish yanking the line too hard, or maybe the kid losing a worm to a particularly rude trout. But then, with one innocent step, the boy's right leg pulled a disappearing act straight into the riverbank. Not mud, not soft dirt. No, he'd landed in nature's sneakiest trap: quicksand. Thick, heavy, clingy quicksand. The stage 5 clinger of terrain types. Dad, channeling full superhero energy, dove to the rescue. He managed to yank out the boy's left leg like a man pulling Excalibur from a stone. But the right leg? That sucker was deeply committed to the bit. It had RSVP'd to the underground party and was not planning on leaving. Cue the entrance of local firefighters, 3 of them, all confident and probably thinking, "We've handled fires, floods, and cats in trees. How hard can this be?" Spoiler, very. They grabbed the boy's arms and pulled with all their might, probably imagining a triumphant pop like opening a stubborn jar. Nothing. The kid didn't budge. Quicksand, 1. Fire department, 0. Not once to back down, the firefighters dropped to the ground and started digging with their bare hands. This was no longer a rescue. It was a dirt-fueled brawl between humans and Mother Nature's gooey trap. But then, plot twist. The rescuers began sinking too. Yep, the quicksand was like, "Oh, you want to help? How about you stay a while?" Panic? Maybe. Cleverness? Definitely. Thinking fast, the crew grabbed driftwood and fallen branches like some sort of survivalist Lego set. They built an impromptu platform, standing on it like swamp kings to stop themselves from turning into the next chapter of this cautionary tale. Meanwhile, the boy wasn't doing great. His leg was numb, his body was shaking, and hypothermia was making its dramatic entrance. This was now a race against time, temperature, and topography. For almost an hour, they battled stubborn soil with sheer willpower, a few logs, and a mutual refusal to let a kid be defeated by literal dirt. Finally, thanks to good old-fashioned teamwork, they pulled the boy free. He was cold, shaken, but alive, and probably never going near a muddy riverbank again. The damage? Mild hypothermia. The lesson? Quicksand is real, it doesn't care about your relaxing day, and apparently it has a grudge against fishing trips. In the end, one small misstep transformed a Norman Rockwell afternoon into something out of an action movie, minus the explosions, plus a whole lot of wet socks. Moral of the story: if the ground feels extra squishy, maybe step back instead of forward. Just saying. On the evening of April 25th, 2021, 29-year-old Taylor Kaye was wrapping up what seemed like a lovely night in downtown San Diego. An event planner with a bright smile and an even brighter future, she had just finished a dinner date at Basic Bar and Pizza in the East Village. She and her date, Alex, were strolling down the street near the Padres Parkade parking garage, carrying leftovers, chatting and laughing. Just 2 people enjoying the early spring evening. But at 7:23 p.m., the unimaginable happened. As they crossed the street at 10th Avenue and J Street, tragedy, quite literally, fell from the sky. 9 stories above, Christian Anders, a man in his early 20s, stood on the edge of the parking structure. Struggling with mental health issues, he had reached out to his mother earlier in the day, overwhelmed and in despair. In a heartbreaking moment, he jumped. He fell directly onto Taylor. The impact was instantaneous. She had no chance to react. Alex, just inches away, was unharmed physically but watched helplessly as Taylor collapsed beside him. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but she was pronounced dead there. Anders was taken to the hospital and later died from his injuries. The freak accident left San Diego stunned. Taylor had been just days away from celebrating her 30th birthday. She had planned a wine-tasting trip to Temecula with friends, and her father Kent was going to drive. Her life was full of excitement, plans, and the kind of love that comes from being deeply connected to her family, her friends, and her work. Professionally, Taylor had spent nearly a decade at McFarlane Promotions, rising from intern to event manager. Her boss, Laurel McFarlane, said Taylor wasn't just an employee, she was like family. She was dependable, kind, and full of life, McFarlane said. She was truly special. During the pandemic, Taylor had moved back in with her dad to help care for him through health issues. Their bond was the kind of father-daughter connection people talk about with admiration. She adored her dad, and he adored her, McFarlane recalled. Taylor's 2 rescue dogs, Rue and Stella, whom she had adopted from Tijuana, were beloved companions she often brought to work. After her passing, her father took them in, continuing the love she had given them. As for Christian Anders, his story is a quieter tragedy. Though he had reached out to his mother that day, the depth of his struggle remained mostly invisible until it was too late. His pain ultimately ended 2 lives, his own and that of a woman full of promise. Taylor's sudden passing left friends and loved ones asking painful, unanswerable questions. What if she had taken a different street that night? Could Anders have been helped sooner? While those questions may never find resolution, Taylor Kaye is remembered for her light, her kindness, and her impact. Her life, though cut short, is a poignant reminder to cherish each moment and each other. The Tenerife airport disaster, which took place on March 27, 1977, remains the deadliest aviation accident in history, a title no one ever wants to hold. It happened at Los Rodeos Airport, now Tenerife North Airport, in the Canary Islands, when 2 massive Boeing 747s, one from KLM and the other from Pan American World Airways, tragically collided on the runway in dense fog, resulting in the loss of 583 lives. What makes this disaster even more haunting is that it wasn't caused by a mechanical failure or bad weather alone, but by a tragic sequence of miscommunication, assumptions, and bad timing that spiraled into the worst-case scenario. At the time, Los Rodeos was never meant to be hosting such a crowd. A terrorist bombing at nearby Gran Canaria Airport had forced dozens of incoming flights to divert to this much smaller, fog-prone airfield. As a result, the runway and taxiways were congested with parked planes and stressed crews, all waiting for clearance to depart. The weather then decided to make things even more complicated by rolling in thick fog, limiting visibility to just a few hundred feet. It was under these already tense and confusing conditions that the KLM and Pan Am flights began preparing for takeoff. Both aircraft were on the same runway. KLM had lined up, waiting to take off, while Pan Am was taxiing ahead, trying to find the right exit. Due to the poor visibility, the crews couldn't see each other, and neither could the control tower. That's where communication became absolutely critical, and unfortunately, where it also began to unravel. The KLM captain, a highly experienced pilot, misunderstood a transmission from air traffic control as a takeoff clearance. Confident he had permission to depart, he powered up the engines and began his takeoff roll. Meanwhile, the Pan Am plane was still taxiing slowly ahead on the same runway, unaware of the impending danger behind them. The result was catastrophic. By the time the Pan Am crew spotted the KLM jet barreling toward them through the fog, there was no time to react. The 2 aircraft collided at high speed, tearing through each other and igniting a massive fireball. The KLM plane became airborne for just a moment before crashing back down, while the Pan Am jet was torn apart. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but the fire and wreckage made rescue efforts incredibly difficult. Only 61 people survived, all from the Pan Am flight. Everyone aboard the KLM aircraft was killed. In the aftermath, investigators were determined to figure out how such a terrible miscommunication could occur. It became clear that a combination of ambiguous radio messages, assumptions by the flight crew, and the lack of visual confirmation led to the disaster. One major issue was the use of non-standard language between pilots and air traffic control. Phrases like, "We are at takeoff," were misinterpreted, and important confirmations weren't repeated or clarified. The aviation industry responded swiftly. One of the most significant outcomes was the global adoption of standard phraseology, a set of clear, concise, and universally understood phrases used in all aviation communication. Pilots and controllers were trained to use precise language, always confirming and repeating instructions. Additionally, the importance of crew resource management, CRM, gained attention, emphasizing teamwork, communication, and assertiveness within the cockpit, regardless of hierarchy. While the Tenerife disaster remains a deeply painful chapter in aviation history, it also became a catalyst for sweeping changes in airline operations and safety culture. The lessons learned have saved countless lives since. Today, commercial aviation is safer than ever, and much of that progress can be traced back to the hard lessons learned on that foggy runway in Tenerife. It's easy to be seduced by a beautiful view, especially one like Morcambe Bay, with its postcard-perfect coastline, tranquil waves, and skies that practically beg to be Instagrammed. It looks like the kind of place where danger wouldn't dare show its face, but behind the serene surface lies something far more sinister. Morcambe Bay isn't just a picturesque picnic spot, it's a shape-shifting death trap disguised as a tourist attraction. This coastal beauty is notorious for two things: legendary fishing and quicksand that moves faster than your Wi-Fi during a storm. The sandbanks here don't sit still. They shuffle around like a magician's three-card trick, and if you guess wrong, you don't just lose your footing, you might lose your life. The currents are powerful, unpredictable, and constantly carving new paths through the seabed, creating quicksand pits that appear and disappear faster than your favorite snacks during a Netflix binge. Enter Karen Parkinson and her merry band of unsuspecting beachgoers. It was meant to be a chill day by the water, some laughs, a little sun, and maybe a paddle in the shallows if things got wild. They weren't adventurers. They weren't daredevils. They were just regular folks looking for some seaside relaxation. But Morcambe Bay had other plans. The day was peaceful, until it wasn't. Suddenly, a siren shattered the calm. Not the ice cream truck is here kind of siren. No, this was the kind of siren that screams, "Run, now!" The tide was rolling in fast, faster than they expected. They turned to head back, but Mother Nature had already played her card. In the blink of an eye, one girl from the group found herself waist deep in what looked like regular old beach. Her legs had vanished into the wet sand like she was being swallowed whole by a beach monster. Spoiler, the beach monster was real, and its name was Quicksand. Karen and the girl's mother rushed to her side because that's what heroes do. Unfortunately, Quicksand doesn't care about your intentions. It grabbed them too. In a matter of seconds, they were all stuck. Not, oops, mud on my shoes, stuck. More like, if I move, I might disappear entirely, stuck. And to make things extra spicy, the water was rising fast, turning their sandy predicament into a literal race against the tide. Cue the entrance of the real MVPs, the Coast Guard. 12 of them, all trained, all fast, and all wearing the kind of bright gear that screams, "We save lives before breakfast." They arrived just in time and immediately sprang into action. Ropes, teamwork, a little grunting, and probably some very intense eye contact. One by one, the rescuers yanked the victims free from the mud's clingy embrace. It wasn't elegant, and it definitely wasn't comfortable, but it was effective. Had they arrived just 5 minutes later, the story would have taken a very dark turn. That peaceful bay, it would have claimed 3 lives without a second thought. So, what can we learn here? Well, first, never trust a pretty beach with a sketchy reputation. Second, quicksand is not just a movie thing. It's very real, very sneaky, and has absolutely no chill. And third, if a siren goes off while you're at the beach, don't stop to take selfies. Run like you're being chased by angry crabs with boxing gloves. Karen and her crew were lucky, but as you'll see in our next story, not everyone gets a cinematic rescue. Because while Morcambe Bay hides danger beneath beauty, there are places out there where even trained hikers, explorers, and seasoned wanderers fall victim to nature's silent traps. Stay tuned, because some landscapes don't just test your strength, they test your timing, your choices, and your ability to avoid becoming part of the scenery. In the blistering heat of a summer day in 2021, a 22-year-old man in China reached for something many of us turn to when we're melting under the sun, a cold, fizzy drink. But instead of sipping it casually, he guzzled down 1.5 liters of Coca-Cola in just 10 minutes, a choice that would prove to be tragically fatal. Healthy, young, and with no known medical issues, he likely didn't think twice. After all, who dies from drinking soda? 6 hours later, he arrived at Beijing's Chaoyang Hospital in agonizing pain. His stomach was bloated, his breathing was rapid, his blood pressure had plummeted, and his heart was racing. Clear signs that something had gone very, very wrong. But even seasoned doctors weren't prepared for what they saw next. A CT scan revealed an alarming amount of gas trapped not only in his intestines but also in his portal vein, a major vessel that shuttles blood from the digestive system to the liver. This rare condition, called pneumatosis, is as dangerous as it sounds. It can block oxygen-rich blood from reaching the liver, leading to something ominously dubbed shock liver, or hepatic ischemia. In simple terms, his liver was suffocating. Normally, excess gas finds a way out through a burp or, well, the other end. But in this case, the rapid Coca-Cola binge produced gas so quickly that it had nowhere to go. Under extreme pressure, some of that gas was forced into places it definitely didn't belong, wreaking havoc on his insides. Doctors jumped into action. They tried everything: anti-inflammatory medications, IV fluids, and techniques to relieve the pressure. But the damage was already snowballing. Within 12 hours, tests showed his liver was failing, and by the 18-hour mark, it was too late. His body gave out, and he passed away shortly after arriving. The case was later published in the Clinics and Research in Hepatology and Gastroenterology Journal, where medical professionals scratched their heads. It was a first-of-its-kind tragedy, soda-induced liver failure from gas overload. Still, not everyone's convinced the Coca-Cola alone was to blame. Professor Nathan Davies, a biochemist at University College London, voiced skepticism. He suggested the possibility of an undiagnosed bacterial infection, one that could have produced excessive internal gas and made things worse. If that's the case, the soda was the final spark in a gas-filled powder keg. Was it the Coca-Cola? Was there an underlying condition? Nobody can say for sure, but this stomach-turning story has stirred up some serious conversation about just how quickly we consume fizzy drinks. Let's be real. Millions of people chug soda every day without dropping dead. But this rare and extreme case shows that under the right or wrong circumstances, even something as familiar as a soft drink can turn deadly. Could he have survived if he'd taken his time, sipping instead of slamming it down? Possibly. Would smaller sips have given his body a chance to handle the carbonation? Maybe. But like many medical mysteries, this one might never have a definitive answer. What's left behind is a chilling reminder. Our bodies aren't built to process extremes well, even when those extremes come in the form of something as seemingly harmless as a bottle of Coke. So next time you're tempted to beat the heat by downing a liter and a half of soda in one go, maybe just don't. Your stomach, liver, and portal veins will thank you. On August 12, 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123 left Tokyo's Haneda Airport for what was supposed to be a short and uneventful flight to Osaka. It was a routine domestic trip, something the airline had done countless times before without incident. The aircraft, a Boeing 747SR, was a specially modified version of the jumbo jet designed for short-haul, high-capacity flights within Japan. On board were 524 people, mostly families returning home, business travelers heading to meetings, and a dedicated crew guiding them through what should have been a simple journey from point A to point B. But about 12 minutes after takeoff, the ordinary became unthinkable. At 6:24 p.m., a loud bang shattered the usual hum of the engines and the relative calm of the cabin. The rear pressure bulkhead, an essential structural component that keeps the aircraft pressurized at altitude, had suddenly failed. What followed was an explosive decompression that tore through the tail of the aircraft. In an instant, the vertical stabilizer, essentially the plane's steering fin, was ripped clean off. To make matters worse, the explosion severed all 4 of the plane's hydraulic systems, the systems responsible for moving the control surfaces. In simple terms, the plane had no way to steer or stabilize itself. The root cause of the disaster traced back to a repair made 7 years earlier, after the plane had suffered a tail strike upon landing. The bulkhead had been improperly repaired by using a single row of rivets instead of the required double row. This flawed fix created a weak point in the structure. For years, it silently endured the stress of repeated pressurization cycles until that fateful evening when it finally gave way. With the aircraft severely crippled, the flight crew, led by Captain Masami Takahama, faced an almost impossible situation. Deprived of traditional flight controls, they attempted to steer using nothing but engine thrust, powering up one side to turn and easing off the other to adjust direction. This technique, known as differential thrust control, is extraordinarily difficult and rarely practiced outside of simulators. But somehow, they managed to keep the aircraft flying, barely, for another 32 minutes. Their efforts were nothing short of heroic, showcasing remarkable skill, discipline, and composure under unimaginable pressure. During those 32 minutes, the aircraft flew in wild, looping patterns over the mountainous terrain of central Japan. Air traffic control remained in contact with the crew, though the situation remained dire. Fighter jets were scrambled and caught glimpses of the struggling jumbo jet, but they were unable to assist. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. The plane was violently shaking, pitching and rolling unpredictably, and many passengers understood that the situation was desperate. Some began writing farewell letters to loved ones, scrawling notes on air sickness bags, tray tables, and whatever paper they could find. At 6:56 p.m., the aircraft could no longer sustain flight. It crashed into the rugged face of Mount Takamagahara in the Ueno area of Gunma Prefecture. The impact was catastrophic. Of the 524 people on board, only 4 survived, all women seated near the rear of the plane. Miraculously, one of them was a 12-year-old girl. Rescue operations were hampered by communication breakdowns and the challenging terrain. Tragically, the delay meant that several passengers who might have survived the crash succumbed to their injuries before help could arrive. The crash of Flight 123 remains the deadliest single-aircraft disaster in aviation history. It left an indelible mark on Japan and the global aviation community. Boeing eventually took responsibility for the flawed repair guidelines that contributed to the disaster. The tragedy prompted sweeping reforms in aircraft maintenance protocols, repair certification processes, and emergency response coordination. To this day, the crash is remembered not only for its massive loss of life, but for the extraordinary efforts of a flight crew who fought to the very end to save their passengers. It stands as a powerful reminder that in aviation, every detail matters, and that the smallest oversight can lead to the most devastating consequences. Imagine you're on a peaceful beach walk, the sun's gently shining, the waves are doing their soft shh thing, and life is feeling pretty postcard perfect. Now, imagine the earth just yeets your legs like it's had enough of your vacation vibes. That's exactly what happened to Jaime Accord on a seemingly innocent stroll along the shores of Phippsburg, Maine. Jaime and her husband were enjoying what can only be described as a dreamy couple's walk along a quiet beach. The sand beneath their feet felt firm, like this could be a beach commercial firm. Birds chirped, the breeze whispered. Everything was going great, until it wasn't. Without any warning, like zero drama buildup, Jaime's legs just disappeared. Poof, gone. One moment she was walking, the next she was sunk waist-deep in a sand trap that didn't even have the courtesy to say hello. I couldn't get myself out, Jaime later recalled, sounding way more composed than most of us would be in that moment. Naturally, she turned to her husband and asked the obvious question, "Can you pull me out?" To which he replied, completely gobsmacked, "Where are your legs?" Not exactly reassuring. Jaime, to her credit, could feel her legs, which is nice, but she couldn't see them. Not so nice. Thankfully, her husband snapped out of his quicksand-induced confusion and managed to yank her free from the sneaky sinkhole. Crisis averted, legs recovered, dignity, hopefully, still intact. But not everyone gets a happy ending with surprise beach quicksand. In fact, quicksand along beaches is sneakier than a cat in a cucumber field. Especially during low tide, it loves to play camouflage. You might walk right into it without realizing it's not solid ground, just overly saturated sand with a thin sheet of water over it. Looks normal, feels like a betrayal. Enter Shane Hobble, survival expert and professional don't die this way guy. He later demonstrated how you should deal with a quicksand situation, should you find yourself channeling your inner Indiana Jones on the shoreline. First rule, don't panic. Easier said than done when Mother Earth is slurping up your feet like a milkshake. Flailing around? Bad idea. That just makes you sink faster. The real trick, according to Shane, is to stop and slow your roll. Literally, you want to shift your weight gradually. Spread your limbs like a human starfish and try to distribute your body across the surface. Use a stick if you've got one, and if not, get on your hands and knees and slowly crawl out like you're sneaking away from a toddler's birthday party. The key word here is slow. Drama gets you deeper. What's especially unnerving is that we tend to think of quicksand as something out of a jungle adventure flick. You know, vines, snakes, fog, the whole shebang. But no, sometimes it's chilling right beneath your beach towel while you're daydreaming about ice cream. So, what did we learn here? First, always check your sand before you strut. Second, if the ground suddenly gives you the silent treatment and tries to eat your lower half, stay cool and channel your inner sloth. And finally, quicksand doesn't need a jungle. It just needs one unsuspecting beachgoer and a little low-tide mischief. As we shimmy over to our next tale, brace yourself, because the next death trap isn't wet and sunny, it's cold, remote, and eerily silent. From beachy betrayal to frosty wilderness, the quicksand saga continues. On April 19, 2023, in Alwar, India, an accident occurred that sounds so outlandish, it could pass for a dark comedy sketch, if only it weren't real. It involved a high-speed train, a stray cow, and a retired electrician who became the unluckiest bystander in one of the most bizarre tragedies in recent memory. Shivdayal Sharma, 82, was no stranger to the railway tracks. After all, he'd worked for Indian Railways for decades before retiring 22 years ago. On that fateful day, he was near the Kalwar Gate area of Alwar, a place he knew like the back of his hand. What he didn't know was that death was about to arrive, not by train, but by cow. Yes, you read that right. The Vande Bharat Express, one of India's sleekest, fastest trains, was barreling down the tracks at about 160 kilometers per hour. That's 100 miles per hour for the metrically challenged, when a stray cow wandered onto the rails. What happened next defies belief. The train struck the cow with such force that the animal was launched into the air, reportedly flying nearly 100 feet. Unfortunately, gravity took the worst turn imaginable. The airborne cow crashed directly into Sharma, killing him instantly. Another man nearby barely escaped, shaken but unharmed. Sharma, however, stood no chance. One moment, he was simply standing by the tracks. The next, gone in a freak accident that left even seasoned authorities stunned. The incident sent shockwaves through the community and quickly made headlines. How could such a thing even happen? As strange as it seems, it wasn't entirely unpredictable. Stray cattle on Indian railway tracks are a known hazard, especially in rural and semi-urban areas. Cows roam freely, often crossing tracks to graze or wander, completely unaware that a high-speed train might be heading their way. In most cases, it's the animal that meets a tragic end. But in rare and horrifying instances like this, innocent people nearby suffer the consequences. Authorities responded swiftly. Sharma's body was recovered, sent for post-mortem, and returned to his grieving family for last rites. Meanwhile, the Indian Railway Ministry launched an investigation and vowed to take stronger action to prevent similar tragedies. Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw announced new safety initiatives, including the installation of metal fencing along key rail corridors to keep animals off the tracks. Clearing garbage and overgrown vegetation, things that attract stray animals, was also prioritized. In fact, a massive 620-kilometer fencing project was already underway along the Mumbai-Ahmedabad route. While these steps are commendable, many couldn't help but wonder, What if these measures had come sooner? Could Sharma have been saved if the fencing had been installed in Alwar before April? Was this an entirely avoidable death? The sad truth is that a cow becoming a deadly projectile is something no one prepares for. And yet, the laws of physics don't discriminate. Combine mass, velocity, and bad luck, and you get tragedy. The story spread like wildfire online, with people expressing disbelief. Killed by a flying cow, one commenter wrote. Sounds like a twisted joke, but it wasn't. It was the end of an elderly man's quiet life in the most unexpected way possible. So, what can we take from this? Maybe just a deeper respect for life's randomness. One day, you're enjoying a walk by the tracks. The next, you're a headline that no one can believe is real. Shiv Dayal Sharma's story is not just a freak accident, it's a wake-up call. A call to act faster, fence smarter, and maybe, just maybe, look both ways for flying cows. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur, heading for Beijing on what was supposed to be a routine red-eye flight. It was a quiet night with 239 people on board, passengers and crew settling in for the journey ahead. The plane, a Boeing 777, was one of the most reliable aircraft in the skies. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. And then, about 38 minutes after takeoff, the flight simply disappeared. At first, air traffic control lost contact. Not entirely unusual. Sometimes communications dip, but this wasn't just a blip. The plane's transponder, which communicates with radar systems, had gone dark. One moment it was there. The next, it was off the grid. As authorities scrambled, it was discovered that the aircraft had made a sharp left turn, doubling back over the Malaysian peninsula. From there, it veered off its flight path entirely, heading southwest into the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean. What followed was one of the largest and most expensive search efforts in aviation history. Multiple countries joined the hunt. Ships, planes, satellites, all combed through thousands of square miles of ocean. But despite all the tech and teamwork, MH370 seemed to have vanished without a trace. For weeks, then months, the world waited. Families clung to hope, investigators chased every lead, and theories began to swirl. Some debris eventually washed up, parts of a wing, some internal components, found on remote beaches in places like Reunion Island and the coast of Africa. These fragments confirmed one thing: MH370 had crashed. But where exactly and why remained maddeningly unclear. Satellite data suggested the plane had flown for hours after contact was lost, deep into the Indian Ocean, far from any radar or rescue. With no black box, no clear wreckage, and no final communication from the cockpit, the theories came fast. Was it a hijacking? A mechanical failure? A deliberate act? Everyone from aviation experts to conspiracy theorists weighed in. The Malaysian government and international investigators released reports, but no theory could be proven beyond doubt. The mystery stayed locked beneath the waves. To this day, the disappearance of MH370 is one of aviation's greatest enigmas. It sparked worldwide debate on aircraft tracking, leading to changes in how planes are monitored over oceans. But it also left behind heartbreak, for the families who never got closure and for the public still wondering how a massive commercial aircraft could simply vanish in the 21st century. It's a haunting reminder that even with all our modern technology, the world can still keep its secrets. And somewhere, deep in the ocean's silence, MH370 waits, its story still unfinished. Endurance. It's not about bulging biceps or how many push-ups you can crank out at the gym. No, true endurance is when Mother Nature herself tries to drag you underground like a villain in a low-budget horror film, and you still manage to hang in there. That's exactly the nightmare that 25-year-old Robbie Tassar stumbled into. Our story begins in the wilds of Utah, near a cheerfully named patch of land called the Dirty Devil River. Spoiler alert, it lives up to the name. Robbie was on a 25-day wilderness expedition with his class, probably expecting scenic views, rugged bonding, and maybe a blister or two. Instead, he got front row seats to his own survival thriller. After 3.5 weeks of hardcore hiking across brutal terrain that could have doubled as Mars, Robbie and the group were crossing what looked like a totally innocent riverbank. You know, just some dry sand. Nothing to see here, folks. Robbie took a step, and the next thing anyone knew, whoosh, the guy was sinking faster than your Wi-Fi during a storm. Within seconds, he was waist-deep in quicksand. Yes, actual quicksand. The stuff we all thought only existed in cartoons and 80s action flicks. This wasn't just a whoops, I tripped moment. This was a the earth is trying to eat me situation. Cue the panic. Robbie's classmates rushed in, pulling at his arms like a game of human tug-of-war. But quicksand isn't just sand. It's basically clingy mud with abandonment issues. The more they yanked, the more it held on. To make matters worse, Mother Nature decided to really double down on the drama. Temperatures dropped to just above freezing, 4 degrees Celsius, that's 39 degrees Fahrenheit for those using freedom units. And the wet, clingy mud began to harden around Robbie like nature's own version of cement shoes. Minutes dragged into hours. And not that this meeting could have been an email kind of hours. These were long, freezing, terrifying hours. Every tick of the clock drained more hope. The group had no choice but to activate their emergency beacon, which basically sends an SOS to whoever's got a helicopter in a bad sense of danger. Night fell. Rescue teams arrived, armed not with capes and superpowers but with inflatable rafts and shovels, because you don't mess around with quicksand. One wrong move, and they could have ended up adding more guests to the mud party. They dug carefully, inch by inch, until, at 1 a.m., a full 13 hours after Robbie took his fateful step, he was finally pulled free from the Earth's clingy embrace. Miraculously, he survived with all limbs intact and a story that beats any dinner party anecdote. That time, I almost got eaten by the ground. Definitely beats I saw a moose once. The real kicker? This deadly trap looked like just another patch of dirt. Innocent, ordinary, bland. But quicksand doesn't come with neon warning signs or ominous music cues. Rivers, beaches, hiking trails, they're all potential quicksand hideouts. And once you step in, it's already too late. It doesn't suck you under like in the movies, it just holds you in place for hours until you either freeze, dehydrate, or get lucky. So, the next time you're out hiking and see a patch of sand that looks a little too inviting, maybe take the long way around. Robbie did 13 hours in nature's cold mud hug. You don't want to top that. On January 14th, 2009, in Shaoxing, China, 14-year-old Xiaogang was doing something completely ordinary, just sitting at his computer. Maybe gaming, maybe studying, maybe scrolling through memes. Who knows? What we do know is that one small adjustment to his chair set off a chain of events so bizarre, so tragic, it sounds like something from a Final Destination movie. You see, Zhao Gang was using a standard swivel chair, the kind you'll find in almost every office or home study. It had a gas spring mechanism, which allows you to adjust the height with the simple pull of a lever. Super convenient, right? Well, not on this day. As Zhaogang reached down to tweak the chair height, disaster struck. The gas spring inside the chair suddenly failed. But this wasn't a slow leak or a harmless pop. Nope, this was a full-on explosion. The pressurized gas cylinder ruptured violently, launching the metal rod inside the chair straight up with deadly force. And tragically, it struck Xiaogang in a sensitive and critical area, causing severe internal injuries. Despite the unimaginable pain, Xiaogang managed to grab his phone and call his father, explaining what had happened. His dad rushed home, likely expecting a minor injury, maybe a cut or a bruise. But what he found was every parent's nightmare. Xiaogang was conscious, but in critical condition. Paramedics arrived and quickly transported him to the hospital, but the damage was just too extensive. Despite every effort from the medical team, he didn't make it. The cause of death? Massive internal bleeding from a completely unexpected source, his desk chair. An investigation later confirmed that the culprit was a defective gas spring inside the chair. Instead of containing safe, high-pressure nitrogen, like quality gas springs should, this one had been filled with regular air. Sounds like a minor detail, but that shortcut led to unstable pressure buildup and eventually an explosion. The spring wasn't just faulty, it was a ticking time bomb. And here's the scary part. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Just over a year earlier, in November 2007, a 68-year-old man was seriously injured when his own chair's gas spring malfunctioned. Shards of metal burst out and lodged into his body, causing painful injuries and a long road to recovery. He survived, but the message was clear. These weren't isolated incidents. They were signs of a bigger problem. Investigators found that many office chairs, especially low-cost ones, were being made with substandard materials and little to no quality control. In a bid to cut costs, some manufacturers skipped certifications, used the improper components, and hoped no one would notice. Most of the time, no one did, until it was too late. Xiao Gang's grieving parents were devastated. They called for justice and accountability, believing, rightfully, that if the chair had been made with proper safety standards, their son would still be alive. Their plea sparked a national conversation about consumer safety, especially in the often overlooked world of office furniture. Experts and safety organizations chimed in, urging stricter regulations and better awareness. They warned buyers to be cautious of unknown brands and cheap knockoffs, and pushed for mandatory certifications to prevent such tragedies. So, was Xiao Gang's death a freak accident? Maybe, but it was also the result of cutting corners, ignored warnings, and lax oversight. His story is more than just a cautionary tale. It's a gut-wrenching reminder that even the most everyday items can turn deadly if built without care. Next time you adjust your office chair, you'll probably think of Xiao Gang, and maybe, just maybe, check the label first. On March 24, 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525 was on its way from Barcelona to Dusseldorf. It seemed like any other routine flight, with passengers relaxing in their seats and the crew going through their usual pre-flight procedures. But the tragic events that followed would forever change the airline industry. The plane, an Airbus A320, was carrying 150 people when it suddenly crashed into the French Alps. The cause? A deliberate act by the co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz. Here's where things take a chilling turn. When the captain briefly left the cockpit, Lubitz locked him out. The cockpit door was reinforced, making it impossible for the captain to regain access. Inside, Lubitz made a devastating decision. Rather than follow standard procedure, he intentionally set the autopilot to descend rapidly, sending the plane toward the mountains below. The cockpit voice recorder captured the captain's desperate attempts to re-enter, but Lubitz remained silent, and the plane continued its terrifying descent. The sound of the captain's frantic efforts to break the door open was captured on the recording, along with the unmistakable noise of the plane's fatal plunge. It was an unimaginable turn of events that no one could have predicted. What made this situation even more shocking was that Lubitz had a history of mental health issues, including depression, which he had kept hidden from his employer. Investigators later found that he had sought treatment for these issues and had even been deemed unfit to fly on some occasions, but he had continued to work as a pilot. It became clear that he had been struggling privately with these issues, and tragically that led to this fatal decision. Lubitz's actions raised uncomfortable questions about the role of mental health in aviation safety, particularly the extent to which employers are responsible for ensuring that their employees are fit to fly. The Germanwings crash sent shockwaves throughout the aviation community, leaving everyone from industry experts to the public grappling with the implications of such a senseless act. In the aftermath of the crash, the aviation world was shaken to its core. The incident prompted immediate changes in airline policies, most notably the implementation of the two-person rule. This new rule mandates that at least 2 crew members must be present in the cockpit at all times, whether it's the captain and co-pilot or the co-pilot and a flight attendant. The hope was that this would prevent something like this from ever happening again, ensuring that no one could be left alone in the cockpit with the ability to make such a tragic decision. The Germanwings crash left a lasting mark on the aviation community and raised questions about mental health awareness, pilot screening, and the responsibility of employers to ensure their staff is fit for duty. The tragedy is a stark reminder of how important it is to address mental health issues, particularly in high-stakes professions like aviation, where the safety of others is in the hands of one person. The crash also highlighted the need for better systems of support for those dealing with mental health challenges, especially when those individuals hold jobs that could impact the lives of hundreds of people at a time. In the end, the crash claimed the lives of all 150 people on board, leaving families and loved ones devastated. While changes were made in the wake of the incident, it's a painful reminder that sometimes even the most routine of flights can take an unimaginable turn. The Germanwings tragedy remains one of the most heart-wrenching moments in aviation history, and its lessons continue to shape the industry to this day. Snow, sand, and sheer panic. Welcome to Zion National Park, where the views are gorgeous, the trails are scenic, and apparently, the ground can eat you. No one tells you that last part on the brochure. Ryan Osman and his girlfriend Jessica were wrapping up what should have been a wholesome hike, complete with mountain air, cold toes, and picturesque ponds. But Mother Nature had other plans, and she wasn't in the mood to play nice. They had just crossed a shallow pond, probably daydreaming about hot cocoa or at least a dry pair of socks, when the sky started getting all moody and dramatic. Think gray clouds rolling in like villains in a disaster movie. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, Ryan's foot plunged into what looked like solid ground. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. 1 second he was walking, the next he was halfway to China, swallowed up to the thigh in what turned out to be, good old-fashioned quicksand. Surprise, nature's deadliest oatmeal. And as a bonus twist, no phone signal, no help in sight, and oh look, a blizzard was rolling in. Jessica instantly transformed from girlfriend to emergency response team. She handed Ryan 2 sticks to brace around his leg like a makeshift splint and began scooping out the mud with her bare hands. Bare hands. Like it was the world's worst episode of Survivor. But the quicksand had other ideas. Every scoop she took out filled right back in like some sadistic magic trick. Within 30 minutes, snow was dumping like it was trying to set a record, and temperatures were plummeting faster than Ryan's hope. His body started to shut down, because apparently being frozen and buried in mud isn't ideal for human survival. Go figure. Realizing time was running out, Ryan told Jessica the most dramatic and heroic thing he could think of. Leave me. Not in a movie way. More in a please find help or I will become a snow popsicle kind of way. So Jessica ran into the storm, into the wild. No GPS, no signal, no guarantee she'd even find help, much less return in time. Meanwhile, Ryan entered what we can only describe as the worst nap ever. He drifted in and out of consciousness, snow piling onto him like nature's cruelest blanket. He was sure this was it, his final story, cause of death, sand soup. But hours later, just when things were getting extra hopeless, a light appeared. No, not that light, a flashlight, then voices. Jessica had pulled off the impossible. She found a rescue team and led them right back to him. Ryan wasn't out of the mud yet, though. The rescuers had to dig like maniacs, one yanking him by the shoulders while another frantically shoveled cold mud off his leg. Every touch felt like being stabbed by icicles. Every second was agony. But after 12 brutal hours, yes, 12, Ryan was finally free. Alive, frozen, traumatized, but free. His leg was okay, his body slowly warmed up, but his mind not so much. For 3 months, Ryan woke up drenched in sweat, haunted by nightmares of sand, snow, and slow-motion sinking. He survived, yes, but it wasn't just physical. It was a mental cage match against the elements, fear, and a very uncooperative patch of ground. So, next time someone tells you quicksand isn't a real danger, tell them about Ryan Osman, the man who survived being swallowed by the earth and snowstormed by the sky. Zion may be stunning, but it doesn't mess around, and neither does quicksand. It was February 2025 in Planalto, Brazil. a quiet town where 14-year-old Davi Nunes Moreira was just your average teenager. Think energy, mischief, and a healthy obsession with the weird corners of the internet. Davi was curious, adventurous, and always on the hunt for something new. But one bold experiment would turn his story from quirky to tragic in the blink of an eye. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Davy was active, loved hanging out with friends, and could usually be found outside instead of glued to a screen. So, when he came home limping one day, his father figured it was just another day of roughhousing. Davy casually brushed it off. Just a minor injury from playing around, he said. But that limp didn't go away. In fact, things got worse. Nausea set in. Walking became a struggle. Alarms started ringing. With his symptoms snowballing, his father rushed him to the local hospital. But the doctors were baffled. His condition was deteriorating and no one could pinpoint why. So, he was transferred to Vitoria da Conquista General Hospital for more specialized care. That's when Davy dropped a bombshell no one saw coming. In a moment of painful honesty, he revealed to the medical team that he had conducted an experiment, and not the baking soda volcano kind. This one involved a dead butterfly, some water, and a syringe. He had crushed the butterfly, mixed it into a liquid, and injected it into his leg. Why? That part remained murky. Some speculated he was inspired by an online trend or dared by something he saw on social media. Others thought it might have just been an act of unchecked curiosity gone terribly wrong. The confession left everyone, from doctors to internet users, stunned. Experts quickly started weighing in. Some suspected that toxins from the butterfly, especially if it was something like a monarch, might have entered his bloodstream. Others considered more medical culprits: an embolism from air in the syringe, a severe allergic reaction, or a dangerous infection. But the mystery deepened when Davy's father, searching for clues at home, found the syringe tucked under his son's pillow. A piece of evidence that only raised more questions. Despite every effort by the hospital staff, Davy's body couldn't recover. He fought for 7 days but ultimately passed away. The autopsy results are still pending, and doctors continue to debate the exact cause. Whether it was the toxins, the injection itself, or some lethal combination. Naturally, once Davy's story hit the internet, it spread like wildfire. People were shocked, confused, and heartbroken. Many blamed online culture, saying social media had become a breeding ground for risky stunts. "Why are kids doing such dangerous things?" one commenter asked. Another simply wrote, "He was just a kid." They don't think about consequences, only the moment. But here's the twist. Davy himself denied being part of any internet trend. According to him, this wasn't a viral challenge gone wrong. It was his own idea, which, in a way, makes the story even more haunting. Was this the tragic result of innocent scientific curiosity? Or did something darker play a role? Cases like Davy's aren't isolated. From salt and ice challenges to bug-eating dares, young people across the globe have landed in hospitals. Or worse, thanks to poorly thought-out experiments. One influencer even almost lost her toes to a freezing stunt gone sideways. Butterfly expert Professor Marcelo Duarte noted that while butterfly fluids aren't well researched, injecting them directly into your body? Yeah, not a great idea. At the end of the day, Davy's story is a painful reminder that one moment of curiosity can have irreversible consequences. Whether it was a tragic accident or the result of online influence, it serves as a wake-up call. Curiosity is wonderful, but it should never come with a needle. Let's hope this tale becomes a lesson, not just for kids, but for all of us who've ever thought, what's the worst that could happen?